The silence of space was broken by a single, desperate transmission that would change the course of human history forever. Dr. Sarah Chen rubbed her tired eyes as she sat in the communication center of Luna Station, Earth's most advanced, deep, space monitoring facility. The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but she barely noticed. Her attention was fixed on the strange pattern scrolling across her screen, a signal unlike anything she had ever encountered. "Computer, isolate and enhance the transmission on frequency 2847.3, she commanded, her voice barely above a whisper in the sterile white room. The signal cleaned up immediately, revealing something that made Sarah's heart race. It wasn't random, cosmic noise or a pulsar's rhythm. This was organized, structured, and undeniably intelligent. More than that, it carried the unmistakable tone of desperation. Sarah's fingers flew across her keyboard as she ran the signal through every translation algorithm Earth had developed. The patterns were complex, layered with mathematical concepts that served as a universal language bridge. Slowly, painfully, words began to emerge from the chaos. Emergency, coalition forces, Kithara refugees, Voran pursuit, coordinates follow. The message hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't just first contact. This was a cry for help from somewhere in the vast darkness of space. But as she continued decoding, a chilling realization dawned on her. The message wasn't meant for Earth at all. The transmission was addressed to something called the Nexus Coalition, apparently a powerful alliance of species that controlled vast territories in this region of the galaxy. The Kithara, whoever they were, had sent out a desperate plea for military assistance against attackers called the Voran. But due to some cosmic accident, a solar flare, gravitational lensing, or pure chance, the signal had been misdirected to an insignificant blue planet on the edge of an unremarkable star system. Sarah stared at the decoded message for a long moment, then reached for her emergency communication device. Within minutes, she was connected to the highest levels of Earth's government. President Elena Martinez sat in the emergency session of the Global Defense Council, her face grim as she listened to Sarah's report. Around the oval table sat the leaders of Earth's unified military command, each representing different aspects of humanity's defensive capabilities. "So let me understand this correctly, Dr. Chen," President Martinez said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was hearing. "We've intercepted a distress call from an alien species asking for military help from some galactic government, but the message was accidentally sent to us instead?" Sarah nodded from the large screen at the front of the room. "That's correct, Madam President. The Kithara appear to be refugees fleeing from attackers called the Voran. They're asking for immediate military intervention." General Robert Hayes, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, leaned forward. "And we have no idea who these species are, what their capabilities might be, or whether getting involved would put Earth at risk?" "None whatsoever," Sarah admitted. "But the mathematical models in their message suggest they're sophisticated, possibly more advanced than us, and the desperation in their transmission, it's unmistakable." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This was humanity's first contact with alien life, and it was coming in the form of a misdirected cry for help. Defense Minister Li Wei spoke up. "The logical response would be to ignore it. This isn't our fight, and we don't know what we'd be getting into." But President Martinez was already shaking her head. "The logical response, Minister Li, might be to ignore it, but that doesn't make it the right response." Commander Jake Morrison, the head of Earth's newly formed Deep Space Fleet, had been quietly studying the data throughout the meeting. Now he cleared his throat. "Madam President, if I may?" Martinez nodded for him to continue. "We've been preparing for this day for decades," Morrison said, his weathered face showing the strain of years spent building Earth's space defenses. "Not first contact exactly, but the moment when humanity would have to decide what kind of species. We want to be on the galactic stage. Do we want to be the ones who turn away when innocent beings cry for help?" The president looked around the table, studying each face. "Dr. Chen, what's your assessment of the timeline? How long do we have to make a decision?" Sarah consulted her notes. Based on the signal degradation and the coordinates provided, I estimate the Cathera have perhaps 48 hours before their situation becomes critical. If we're going to respond, we need to launch within the next 12 hours. President Martinez stood, her decision made. Commander Morrison, how quickly can you prepare? A rescue fleet? Morrison smiled grimly. The Prometheus-class ships have been ready for deep space operations for 6 months. Give me 8 hours and I'll have a full battle group ready to jump. As the Council dispersed to prepare for humanity's first interstellar mission, Sarah remained, on the communication link, working feverishly to refine the translation algorithms. She knew that if this mission succeeded, clear communication with the Cathera would be essential. 8 hours later, Commander Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, flagship of Earth's most advanced space fleet. Around him in the depths of space, 5 other ships hung in formation, sleek predatory vessels that represented the pinnacle of human engineering and determination. All ships report ready for quantum jump, announced Lieutenant Commander Park, Morrison's tactical officer and one of Earth's most skilled pilots. Coordinates locked on the Cathera signal source. Morrison nodded, his hands gripping the command chair. This is it, people. In a few minutes, we'll be farther from Earth than any human has ever traveled. We're going to meet beings we've never seen, in a situation we don't fully understand, to fight enemies we know nothing about. He paused, looking around at his crew. But we're going anyway, because someone needs help, and we're the only ones who heard the call. That's what makes us human. The quantum drive hummed to life and reality twisted around the small fleet as they jumped through the fabric of space-time itself. They emerged in a system unlike anything in human experience. Twin suns cast an eerie orange glow across space, while the remains of what had once been a planet drifted in a slowly expanding debris field. But it was what was happening near the inner system that caught everyone's attention. "Contact, Lieutenant," Park announced. "Multiple ships, 2 distinct designs. One group appears to be fleeing, the other in pursuit." On the main screen, the tactical display showed the unfolding drama. Several dozen small, elegant vessels were racing away from the system's core, while a larger group of brutal-looking ships chased after them, weapons blazing. "The fleeing ships match the energy signature of the distress call," reported the sensor operator. "Those must be the Cathera." Morrison studied the display, his tactical mind analyzing the situation. The Cathera ships were clearly outgunned and outnumbered. Their pursuers, the Voran presumably, were methodically picking them off one by one. "Commander," Park said quietly, "we're heavily outnumbered. The Voran have at least 20 ships, and they're all larger than anything in our fleet." Morrison nodded grimly. "Then we'll have to be smarter than them. All ships, battle stations. We're going in." As the human fleet accelerated toward the battle, Morrison opened a channel to all ships. "This is not the fight we trained for, but it's the fight we've been given. Remember your training? Trust your instincts and let's show the galaxy what humanity is made of." The first shots were fired by the Voran, massive plasma bolts that lit up the darkness of space. But Commander Morrison had studied the data during the jump and he had a plan. "Scatter formation," he commanded. "Use the debris field for cover and engage with hit-and-run tactics. Don't let them pin us down." The human ships broke formation, weaving between chunks of destroyed planet as they closed with the enemy. The Voran, clearly surprised by the arrival of unknown vessels, began redirecting their fire toward the newcomers. Lieutenant Park's fighter squadron launched from the Defiance Bay, their small craft darting between the larger ships like angry wasps. "This is Falcon Leader," she reported over the comm. "Beginning attack runs on the Voran flanks." The battle was intense and chaotic. The Voran ships were heavily armed and shielded, but they were designed for overwhelming firepower rather than maneuverability. The human vessels, smaller and more agile, used their speed and the cover of the debris field to their advantage, but it was the Cathera who provided the turning point. As the human fleet engaged the Voran, the fleeing refugee ships suddenly turned and joined the fight. Their weapons were different from anything the humans had seen, beams of pure energy that seemed to ignore conventional shielding. More importantly, The Cathara ships began moving in perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. They flowed around the battlefield like a school of fish, striking at weak points in the Vorthan formation with surgical precision. "Commander," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the Cathara fleet." "Audio only, but it's in perfect English." Morrison frowned. "Put it through." A voice filled the bridge, clearly alien, with harmonics that suggested multiple vocal cords but speaking in flawless human language. "Human vessels, this is Cathara of the Cathara Migration Fleet. We are grateful for your intervention. We wish to coordinate our efforts." "This is Commander Morrison of the Earth Defense Fleet," Jake replied. "How are you able to speak our language?" There was a pause before the reply came. "We are empaths. We learn quickly from those around us. Your language, your tactics, your courage. We understand these things. We fight as one now." The combined fleet pressed their advantage. The Vorthan, caught between two forces and confused by the unexpected arrival of human ships, began to retreat. Several of their vessels were destroyed while others limped away into the depths of space. As the battle ended, Morrison found himself staring at the Cathara ships on his display. They were beautiful in their alien design, organic curves that seemed to flow like water, propulsion systems that left trails of shimmering energy. "Cathara," he said into his communicator, "are your people safe?" "We are," came the reply. "Thanks to your intervention. But we must ask, why did you come?" "Our call was not meant for your world," Morrison smiled. "Because someone needed help and we heard the call. That's enough." There was a long pause before Cathara responded. "Your species is unusual. Most beings in the galaxy do not act without benefit to themselves. The Nexus Coalition will be interested to learn of your existence." As the two fleets began to regroup, Morrison couldn't help but wonder what they had gotten themselves into. Earth had just announced its presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible, by answering a misdirected call for help. But as he looked at the Cathara ships, their elegant forms undamaged thanks to human intervention, he knew they had made the right choice. Whatever came next, humanity would face it with the knowledge that they had acted with courage and compassion when it mattered most. The wrong number had been dialed, but Earth had answered anyway. The news of humanity's intervention spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Admiral Zextar of the Nexus Coalition stood in the command center of his flagship, the Sovereign Authority, reading reports that should have been impossible. According to his intelligence networks, an unknown species had somehow intercepted a Cathara distress call and launched an unauthorized military intervention in Vorthan-controlled space. Zextar was an Exari, a species that had dominated galactic politics for over 3 millennia. His crystalline skin reflected the blue light of the command center's displays, while his forearms moved with practiced efficiency across multiple control surfaces. His race had built the coalition through careful diplomacy, strategic alliances, and overwhelming military superiority. And now some upstart species had apparently decided to play galactic politics without permission. "Show me the tactical analysis of the engagement," Zextar commanded, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked his species as natural leaders. The holographic display materialized before him, showing the battle from multiple angles. Zextar watched with growing interest as the human ships moved through space with tactics he had never seen before. They were smaller than standard coalition vessels, but they used speed and unpredictability in ways that clearly frustrated the Vorthan commanders. "The humans," his tactical officer reported, "appear to use individual initiative at a level we've never observed. Each ship captain makes independent decisions while maintaining overall coordination. It's chaotic, but effective." Zextar studied the display more carefully. The human vessels were indeed operating in a manner that defied conventional galactic military doctrine. Where coalition forces relied on centralized command and overwhelming firepower, these humans seemed to thrive on improvisation and individual creativity. "What do we know about their homeworld?" he asked. His intelligence officer consulted her data tablet. The planet they call Earth is located in what we've designated as Sector 7 Alpha, approximately 600 light-years from Coalition space. It's been listed as a primitive world with no significant strategic value. Apparently our intelligence was flawed, Zextar observed dryly. A primitive species doesn't build quantum-capable warships and defeat Vorthan battle groups. Prepare. My personal fleet for departure. I want to meet these humans myself. Meanwhile, back in the system where the battle had taken place, Commander Morrison found himself in the strange position of conducting humanity's first diplomatic meeting with an alien species. The Cathara had requested permission to come aboard, the Defiant, and Morrison had agreed, despite the obvious security risks. Now he stood in the ship's main conference room, waiting to meet beings from another world. The Cathara delegation that entered the room was unlike anything Morrison could have imagined. They were tall and slender, with skin that seemed to shift color subtly as they moved. Their faces were vaguely humanoid but elongated, with large eyes that held an ancient wisdom. Most striking of all, they moved with perfect synchronization, as if they were parts of a single organism. Cathara, the apparent leader, stepped forward. "Commander Morrison," she said, her voice carrying those same harmonic overtones he had heard over the comm, "we are in your debt. Our people live because of your courage." Morrison studied the alien leader, noting how her skin shifted from silver to gold as she spoke. "I'm honored to meet you, Cathara, but I have to ask, how many of your people were involved in this exodus?" Cathara's skin darkened to a deep blue, which Morrison instinctively understood as sadness. "We were once over 50 million strong. Now," she gestured toward her companions, "perhaps 10,000 survive. The Vorthan have been hunting us for decades, selling our people as slaves or worse." The human commander felt a cold anger building in his chest. "Why? What did your people do to deserve this?" "We committed the crime of refusing to join their empire," Cathara explained. "The Vorthan believed that all species should serve their expansion. When we declined their offer of protection, they declared us enemies of order." Morrison was about to respond when his communications officer's voice crackled over the intercom. "Commander, we're detecting multiple quantum signatures approaching. Large ships, unknown configuration." On the main display, space itself seemed to ripple as massive. Vessels emerged from quantum jump. Morrison counted at least 12 ships, each one dwarfing even his largest vessels. They were elegant but clearly powerful, with sleek lines that suggested both speed and devastating firepower. "Coalition forces," Cathara said, her skin shifting to a pale white that Morrison interpreted as fear. "They have come." A transmission filled the conference room, carried by technology far more advanced than anything in the human fleet. The voice that spoke was authoritative and multi-layered, clearly belonging to a being accustomed to being obeyed. "Unknown vessels, this is Admiral Zextar of the Nexus Coalition. You have entered Coalition-monitored space and engaged in unauthorized military action. Prepare to be boarded for interrogation." Morrison looked at Cathara, who nodded gravely. "The Admiral is testing you. The Coalition does not recognize species that cannot defend themselves. If you submit now, your people will be classified as a protectorate, essentially a junior member with no real authority." The human commander straightened his shoulders. "And if we don't submit, then they will determine whether you are worthy to stand as equals." Cathara's skin shifted to an almost golden hue. Few species pass that test. Morrison activated his comm system. "Admiral Zextar, this is Commander Morrison of the Earth Defense Fleet. We appreciate your concern, but we were responding to a distress call from the Cathara. We have no quarrel with the Coalition, but we won't be boarded by anyone." There was a long pause before Zextar responded. "Interesting. Most new species either flee or immediately surrender when confronted by Coalition forces. You choose neither path." "We choose a third path," Morrison replied. "We choose to stand our ground and see what you're really made of." The silence that followed was tense, but it was Cathara who broke it. "Commander," she said quietly, "Admiral Zextar is amused. This is more than most species manage. Zextar's voice filled the room again. "Commander Morrison, I propose a test. The Vorthan maintain several slave camps in this sector, holding not only Cathera but members of a dozen other species. If your people are truly worthy of Coalition attention, you will help us liberate these camps." Morrison felt a grim smile cross his face. "Admiral, you've got yourself a deal." The joint operation that followed became legendary in Coalition history. Human ships, with their unconventional tactics and individual initiative, worked alongside Coalition forces that relied on overwhelming firepower and perfect coordination. The combination proved devastatingly effective. Captain Lisa Park led her fighter squadron through the defense grid of the first slave camp, with maneuvers that Coalition pilots swore were impossible. Her ships twisted and rolled through enemy, fire in patterns that seemed random, but were actually based on mathematical principles that confused targeting systems. "This is Falcon Leader," she reported as her squadron cleared the outer defenses. "Path is clear for the heavy ships. These Vorthan really don't know how to deal with unpredictable flight patterns." The Coalition dreadnoughts followed, their massive guns reducing the camp's defensive installations to scrap metal. But it was the human boarding parties that impressed Admiral Zextar the most. Where Coalition Marines moved in careful, coordinated formations, the human soldiers seemed to operate on pure instinct and teamwork. They adapted to each situation as they encountered it, turning obstacles into advantages and finding solutions that no tactical manual had ever conceived. Commander Morrison himself led the assault on the main administrative complex of the largest camp. His team moved through the facility like a force of nature, freeing prisoners and gathering intelligence with an efficiency that bordered on the supernatural. In the command center, Morrison found himself face-to-face with Vexhan, the Vorthan commander responsible for the slave operations in this sector. The alien was massive, with thick armor plating and weapons integrated into his very body. "So," Vexhan snarled in broken Coalition standard, "the humans think they can play with the big species. You will learn the price of interfering with Vorthan business." Morrison ducked as energy blasts tore through the air where his head had been a moment before. The Vorthan commander was fast for his size, but he was used to fighting enemies who followed predictable patterns. Humans, Morrison reflected as he rolled behind a control console, were anything but predictable. The fight that followed was brutal, but brief. Vexhan had overwhelming firepower and armor, but Morrison had speed, adaptability, and the kind of creative thinking that came from a species that had survived by outsmarting predators rather than overpowering them. When it was over, Vexhan lay unconscious on the deck and Morrison was uploading the contents of the Vorthan database to his tactical computer. The liberation of the slave camps was completed within 6 hours. Thousands of beings from dozens of species were freed, including many Cathera who had been captured in earlier raids. But more importantly, from Admiral Zextar's perspective, humanity had proven itself in the most fundamental way possible. Back aboard the Sovereign Authority, Zextar reviewed the tactical recordings of the human forces in action. What he saw challenged everything he thought he knew about military efficiency. The humans operated with a level of individual initiative that should have led to chaos, but instead created a form of organized unpredictability that was devastatingly effective. Their soldiers didn't just follow orders, they interpreted them, adapted them, and found ways to achieve objectives that their commanders hadn't even thought of. "Fascinating," Zextar murmured to his tactical officer. "They fight like no species we've ever encountered. Each individual acts as both a soldier and a commander, making decisions that serve the larger mission while adapting to immediate circumstances." His tactical officer, a veteran of dozens of campaigns, nodded thoughtfully. "It's inefficient by our standards, Admiral, but it's also unpredictable in a way that clearly frustrates their enemies." Zextar made his decision. He opened a communication channel to the human fleet. "Commander Morrison," he said, "on behalf of the Nexus Coalition, I extend an invitation to your species. Earth is hereby recognized as a sovereign member of the Coalition, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." Morrison's response came immediately. "We're honored, Admiral, but we have one condition." The audacity of making demands during a formal Coalition invitation was unprecedented, But Zextar found himself curious rather than offended. What condition? The Cathara come with us. They're under Earth's protection now. Zextar considered this. The Cathara were refugees with no homeworld and no resources. From a practical standpoint, taking responsibility for them was a burden, not a benefit. Which made it paradoxically exactly the kind of decision he was learning to expect from humans. Agreed, he said. The Cathara will be welcomed as protectorates under Earth's sponsorship. As the combined fleets began their journey toward Coalition space, Morrison stood on his bridge watching the stars. In less than a week, humanity had gone from an unknown species on the galactic frontier to full members of an interstellar alliance. It had all started with a wrong number, a distress call meant for someone else that had accidentally found its way to a small blue planet orbiting an unremarkable star. But that accident had revealed something important about the species that called that planet home. Humans, Morrison realized, had a tendency to answer calls for help, even when those calls weren't meant for them. It was apparently a trait that the galaxy found both unusual and valuable. Cathara approached him on the bridge, her skin now a warm gold color that he had learned indicated contentment. "Commander," she said, "my people have been discussing what has happened. We believe there was no accident in the routing of our distress call." Morrison turned to look at her. "What do you mean?" The Cathara leader's large eyes seemed to hold depths of ancient wisdom. "We are empaths, as I told you. We sense the emotional currents that flow through space itself. Your species broadcasts its nature across the galaxy without even realizing it. Courage, compassion, determination, these things call to those who need them." She paused, her skin shifting to a deeper, richer gold. "Our message found its way to you because, in all the galaxy, you were the ones most likely to answer it. There are no accidents when it comes to courage, Commander Morrison. There are only choices." As the human fleet jumped toward their new future as members of the galactic community, Morrison considered Cathara's words. Perhaps she was right. Perhaps the signal had found its way to Earth not by accident, but because humanity was exactly the kind of species that would drop everything to help strangers in need. If so, it suggested that humanity's role in the galaxy would be far different from what anyone had expected. They wouldn't be conquerors or diplomats or traitors, though they might do all of those things. They would be the ones who answered when someone called for help, even when that call was meant for someone else. In the vast darkness of space, that was perhaps the most human trait of all.